federal prosecutor said they plan to use Trump's continued embrace of these lawbreakers against him at trial. The Justice Department saying that the fact that Trump continues to celebrate and support the insurrectionists shows that his intent was indeed to commit federal crimes, and that Trump, quote, sent supporters, including groups like the Proud Boys, whom he knew were angry and whom he now calls patriots, to the Capitol to achieve the criminal objective of obstructing the congressional certification, unquote. Now, these new developments come just hours after a stunning comment by House Speaker Mike Johnson that Republicans have not yet released the full Capitol security footage from January 6th, as he promised his right flank, because they're busy still blurring the faces of the rioters so as to protect them, at least in part, from prosecution.
We're going through a methodical process of releasing them as quickly as we can. As you know, we have to blur some of the faces of persons who participated in the events of that day, because we don't want them to be retaliated against and to be charged by the DOJ and to have other concerns and problems.
What? Now, in response to understandable questions about Speaker Johnson's comments, his office tried to pretend that the speaker did not say what we all heard, and they tried to pluck out the comment about preventing DOJ from prosecuting them, saying, quote, faces are to be blurred from public viewing room footage to prevent all forms of retaliation against private citizens from any non-governmental actors. The Department of Justice already has access to raw footage from January 6, 2021, unquote. To date, more than 1,200 people have been charged for their actions on January 6, and more than half have either pleaded guilty or been found guilty at trial. Let's bring in CNN's Jamie Gangel and former federal prosecutor Elie Honig. Jamie, what we're talking about here has become a central part of Trump's 2024 campaign, not just embracing the rioters and promising to pardon them, but also continuing to lie that the election of 2020 was stolen.
Right, or as Liz Cheney likes to say, the fact that he remains a clear and present danger by continuing to say these things. Look, Jake, I think this really is an extraordinary glimpse at certainly a part of the special counsel's case. It speaks to intent. It speaks to their charge about conspiracy. And I spoke to some legal experts. I mean, Elie can talk about this more, but the people I spoke to this afternoon, these are former Justice Department lawyers who said they read this as the special counsel likely has evidence, testimony, witnesses that we don't know about yet, which is something we've been wondering about, Jake.
And Elie, prosecutors say they want to use Trump's comments, continued comments about rioters in their case, but Judge Tanya Chutkan, she has to decide if it's going to be allowed. Do you have any idea of how she might rule?
I do think Judge Chutkan will admit this evidence at trial, Jake, because it goes to the core legal issue at the trial, which is Donald Trump's intent. Let me explain how that's going to play out. Prosecutors are going to say that Donald Trump's intent this whole time was to steal the election by any means necessary, right or wrong, legal or illegal. Donald Trump's team is going to say, no, he was merely exercising his rightful, lawful ability to contest the election. Well, here we have hundreds of rioters, people who've been charged and convicted in many instances by their own guilty plea, who were on videotape committing crimes. If Donald Trump's publicly stated position is, and it has been, I support them, I approve of what they did, then that's the prosecution's intent argument here. So I do think this will come in, and I think it's going to be powerful evidence.
Jamie, what do you make of Speaker Johnson's comments today about blurring people's faces in the January 6 videos? I mean, his office says he just misspoke, but that's, I don't know, that's an interesting excuse.
He's a lawyer. He said what he said. I think we should repeat those final words. He did say retaliate against, but he said, and charged by the DOJ. Look, the Speaker of the House in those words is saying straight out that he wants to protect people who potentially did something illegal that day from the DOJ, people who may have attacked law enforcement. I mean, what happened to the rule of law party? I think what's key here is what you mentioned at the top, which is DOJ has seen this footage. if there are people who need to be prosecuted. Maybe they haven't identified everybody yet, but they've seen the footage. But I think it was a stunning thing for him to say.
And Allie, when it comes to retaliation from the general public, I mean, these people, they're adults, almost all of them. 1,200 of them have been charged or pleaded guilty. Is there any legal reason to blur their faces? Forget the DOJ part of it for one second. I mean, they're criminals.
Yeah, there's no legal justification to blur the faces whatsoever. To the contrary, it would get in DOJ's way to do that. Now, they tried to backtrack and say we're worried about private retaliation. That's nonsensical. I don't even know what they're talking about here. But to be clear, what Mike Johnson said is, as Speaker of the House, I'm going to blur these people's faces so they cannot be identified and prosecuted, even though they're on video at the scene of a crime. This would be, by analogy, what if Mike Johnson had surveillance video privately held of a bank robbery and said, before I release this to the public, we need to redact out the faces of some of the participants because I wouldn't want them retaliated against. What Mike Johnson is calling retaliation, I think DOJ would call identification and prosecution.
All right, Ellie Honig, Jamie Gengel, thanks. Let's bring in now Democratic Congresswoman Zoe Lofgren of California and Republican former Congressman Adam Kinzinger of Illinois. Both of them served on the January 6th Select Committee. Congresswoman Lofgren, let's start with the news from the special counsel and how they want to use Trump's support, continued support, for the rioters of January 6th to help prove that he intended to inspire violence that day. How might this potentially bolster the prosecution's case, do you think?
Well, I'll leave it to prosecutors to discuss the rules of evidence, but the former president has made it clear that he stands with law violators, he stands with the rioters. He intended the riot to occur to keep in power. So I think his behavior before, during, and after the riot is all of one piece. He was for violence to overturn the government.
And former Congressman Kinzinger, what's your reaction? Do you think these statements shed light on Trump's intent before the riot, given that he's continuing to talk about these individuals being patriots and deserving pardons?
Yeah, completely. And, you know, all you have to do is see when he calls them political prisoners. Jake, what is it, like 3 weeks ago, he opened up a rally with these quote unquote political prisoners singing the national anthem, and everybody was saluting. You know, about the same time he called for the execution of General Milley. This is in contrast to, there is still like this flavor of people out there that believe that it was the FBI that did January 6th. You'll still hear sometimes it was Antifa, that there was this basically January 6th was just some peaceful people that got wrapped up in everything, which goes to the question of, well, then why is the president, the former president, calling them heroes? And why is why is it that, Speaker Johnson wants to protect their faces if it's the FBI and if it's Antifa? Well, it's obviously not. And it just goes to show the mentality of, we've got to protect our tribe, our side, because this isn't about defending the Constitution anymore. It's about gaining power at all costs. And I think you're seeing that manifest now.
Congresswoman Lofgren, what did you make of Speaker Johnson's comments, clearly saying he wanted to blur faces of rioters before publicly releasing the footage to protect them from retaliation, not only from the general public, but also from the Department of Justice, his office putting out a statement saying he only meant retaliation from private citizens, but that's not what he said.
That's not what he said. Basically, it tells me two things. One, he's trying to protect criminals. This is really obstruction of justice. But also, he's a bozo. Doesn't he realize that all of this video has already been shared with the FBI?
Well, and Congressman Kinzinger, that's his office's excuse for why he didn't mean what he said. Of course, the DOJ already has that. How could he have meant that he was hiding it from the DOJ?
No, he fully meant it. He meant everything he said. He thinks things through when he says them. Here's the thing, in his mindset, he's, the right flank is getting upset because he hasn't released everything. So he's trying to throw him a bone and say, I'm trying to protect them from that evil DOJ. He meant every bit of it. And the interesting thing is, again, the idea that you have to blur any faces. If the FBI did this, which again, not on CNN, but on other networks, you still see this surviving constantly, this Ray Epps theory that there's this FBI thing. Wouldn't you want everybody's face known? And by the way, if you're a rioter, if you're an insurrectionist, the second you cross that police line, actually, the second you got to Washington, D.C., you know that you're on camera. When you broke the law by occupying the Capitol and trying to stop the certification, there's not a single person in there that would have assumed their right to privacy would have covered their face when they were doing that kind of damage. They knew darn well what they were doing. And if you look at the videos, many of them, if not all of them, were proud of what they were doing. So to say that you have to blur it out to protect them from law enforcement is insane, or private retaliation is insane because they publicly broadcasted it themselves.